Greetings to all our learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. The topic that we shall understand and deliberate is Pacifism and Gandhian Legacy. Dear learners, in the lecture today we shall understand the debates on pacifism with respect to global order, look at the analysis of Gandhian perspectives on truth, non-violence, satyagraha, and their enduring legacy, their timeless significance when we take into account the aspect of pacifism in the global context. Dear learners, in this lecture, we shall focus on aspects of pacifism with respect to ethical aspects involved, looking at the fact issues of war, issues of peace, and most important, how do we situate the aspect of pacifism with respect to the Gandhian perspectives on war, peace, non-violence, amongst others. Let us first begin by asking, what do we mean by pacifism? Pacifism, at a very layman understanding, signifies need for peaceful relations. When we look at the concept of pacifism from the negative side, it requires that one has a look at the negative perspectives of violent relations. A general sense from the meaning here is that all forms of violence, war, killing are unconditionally wrong. Now this brings us to the other aspect, that pacifism in terms of methods to resolve disputes. When we look at arbitration, surrender or migration, all of it involves pacifism to a lot of degree. This brings us to the next question: why do we need peace? Peace is significant because it is intrinsically a good value to be upheld either as a duty or on the consequentialist ground that it is more useful to human welfare. And most important, the alternate side, that use of violence or force is detrimental to human welfare. Very important to understand the next question that comes forward, that is whether pacifism is related to the notion of just war theory. Next related question, that is to the argument whether can state legitimately or morally bear arms. Now all these two important correlated debates and questions are important not just for global politics but also for several domestic issues also. So this brings us to the wider framework wherein we can situate pacifism, that is, need to study various dimensions, most important, both war as well as domestic injustices. Then when we study further pacifism, it is called by various typologies: anti-war perspective, theory based on doctrines of non-violence, amongst others. Now let's go into the debates as we understand pacifism as an issue of global politics, but which has a huge bearing on aspects of ethics, domestic politics, amongst others. In terms of debates, we have to see that areas of ethical investigation overlap. There are a lot of ethical persuasions involving pros as well as cons. Then above all, there is a debate on what is meant by violence. Nature of violence is also complex, wherein which when we look at global politics, there are aggressive nations too. Then use of force, debates on the evaluation of moral nature of particular threat, amongst others. looking at sanctity of human life, and most important, morality is always contested. That is, when we look at morality, there are two aspects to it, and each side would claim that they are correct. So therefore, when we also look at pacifism, these issues are involved there in it. Now, when we look at the deeper aspects of pacifism, let's get into the typologies. Absolute pacifism, there are two types of it. Deontological pacifist, that is as a duty, looking at it from the perspective of a duty. We say, let's say no to aggression, never use force. After all, duties are moral actions. Then comes consequentialist pacifism, wherein evils procured by violence, force, war far outweigh any of the good that they may achieve. Then this also brings us to the other aspects of typology, that is conditional deontological pacifism. Enactment of duties cannot be considered, dear learners, in isolation. It never exists in vacuum. So one has to look at different aspects and how they may overlap. Then conditional utilitarian pacifism, that is consequentialist, looking at that the fact that all moral guides are conditional on the circumstance and protracted outcomes of an action. To read more debate on these typologies of pacifism, one must refer to Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy also for a detailed analysis. This brings us to another important aspect, the kind of work that has been already done in international relations for global issues involving aspects of pacifism. Richard Norman, the name of the book Ethics, Killing and War, 1995, raises a very important question. Can one justify war? In the book, with examples from the Gulf War, the Falklands War, one finds that as one dwells into the realm of moral philosophy, there are no concise answers about what constitutes right and what is wrong. Another important work, Martel Seadle, the book Thinking About War and Peace, Oxford University Press, 1987, here in which we find that issues of right and wrong, they always need perspective, approaches to justify and put forward explanation. Within the realm of international relations, there are disagreements over perspectives. Proposals for the prevention of war are as old then, as we go by the account of this book, as the war itself. And above all, there are different varied perspectives, historical situations of different nations. Perpetual Peace, that's an important work by Immanuel Kant. Now, as we go by some of the important remarks made in the book, namely, as we quote from Perpetual Peace, no treaty of peace shall be held valid in which there is tacitly reserved matter for a future war. Second, as we quote, no independent states, large or small, shall come under dominion of another state by inheritance, exchange, purchase or donation. This brings us that as we go by these works, that why is it that in the mainstream international relations theory, we all knew that realism was the dominant, important discourse, approach and perspective, wherein which one can account that how war, security, national interests were looked from the point of view of realists. But pacifism, which involves significant questions, which throws lights on important considerations with respect to humanitarian intervention, questions of war, questions of security. So therefore, one has to ask where and why so far when we look at the mainstream approaches and the field of study, Why have pacifist ideas been ignored? Another very important, when we see that any ideology must relate to actual practice. When we look at this aspect from examples of pacifist movement, dear learners, we give you an example from time.com wherein we find that how the then Czechoslovakia, or examples from every history of modern world in Eastern Europe, witness velvet revolutions where unarmed civilians, they were against big mighty Soviet troops. So this tells us that how pacifist movement has witnessed action at the ground level also when it comes to global politics. Now, dear learners, it's very essential to understand that today when we are debating pacifism world over, there is one icon that is looked upon to impress further, to take the debate further on issues of pacifism with respect to global order, and that is Mahatma Gandhi ji. Mahatma Gandhi ji emphasized on the spiritual unity amongst all. This unity transcended all kinds of differences. For Mahatma Gandhi ji, the very idea of war was wrong, unethical, not based on norms because it contradicts the ideals of ahimsa and above all the higher law of dharma. Truth for Mahatma Gandhi ji was the ultimate good. And when we look at the concept of truth and non-violence, it is very important that how Mahatma Gandhi ji gives them a timeless, significant perspective. In Mahatma Gandhi ji's own words, non-violence and truth are inseparable and they presuppose one another. Most important, his faith in truth to guide the public policy and to guide the individual action was that, as he said, truth never damages a cause that is just. And as he opines, truth stands even if there is no public support. It is self-sustained. So this shows us that how Mahatma Gandhi ji wanted a world order, wanted a domestic order which must be based on the aspect of truth. The other important pillar of the Gandhian ideals, which has a huge significance for the pacifist aspect, that is of non-violence. To elaborate on the wide reach of non-violence that was there for Mahatma Gandhi ji, we quote from his words from the Harijan, 5th September 1936. Non-violence is a power which can be wielded equally by all. Children, young men, women, or grown-up people, provided they have a living faith in the God of love and have therefore equal love for all mankind. When non-violence is accepted as the law of life, it must pervade the whole being and not just apply to isolated acts. So dear learners, we have to see that how in order to eliminate war, Mahatma Gandhi ji opposed imperialism, disarmament. In his own words, as he said, I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. Then most important, his idea is that morality is contraband in war and that morality is the basis of things and truth is the substance of all morality. This tells us that how Mahatma Gandhi ji, when he was thinking or deliberating on issues of violence and non-violence, his vision is having timeless significance when we situated in the bigger picture of pacifism in global order. For Mahatma Gandhi ji, Satyagraha was the way out to fight the wrong, and that required a spiritual quality which was not there in any conventional ordinary warfare. By using Satyagraha, by applying Satyagraha in his everyday life and giving the message of Satyagraha, Gandhiji affirmed one idea, that is no to military action. Mahatma Gandhiji's inspiration also comes from Bhagavad Gita and two very important aspects, that is actions based on unselfishness and being detached from worldly benefits. Today, these ideals have a bigger message for the world community with respect to peace, non-violence, pacifism, amongst others. The aspect of forgiving the opponent and his faith in the reformation of the wrongdoer, and most important, how he candidly asserted that Western imperialism, fascism, and even communism were threats to world peace. His idea of world order was a holistic one, and today's pacifist action also requires that. For him, human economic greed and thereby leading to more violence, all of it were sources of war and aggression. He addressed that there is a need for economic justice, sovereign equality, peaceful cooperation amongst nations, and in his rejection of materialism, he puts forward a very important aspect. When we read Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, who comes up with the idea of deep ecology. Dear learners, we quote this aspect from Gandhi Seva, sevagram.org, that how Arne Næss also said that that his idea of deep ecology comes from Gandhiji. That is the realization of the essential oneness of all life. Gandhiji's qualified pacifism can be known, that is, from his system of belief in which dynamic non-violence is his dialectical method to know and thereby find the ultimate truth without being the end in self. Again, herein very important words of Mahatma Gandhiji, that we may never be strong enough to be entirely non-violent in thought, word and deed, but we must keep non-violence as our goal and make strong progress towards it. Then it's also important to see that how Gandhiji was also somewhere, when we debate further, as an absolute pacifist also. How he condemned military alliances, he condemned the nuclear war, and in his rigorous pacifist perspective, Gandhiji can be read that how during the Second World War, he which was intensified because of nationalist India's negotiation with the British government for immediate freedom. So therefore, for him, war was never appropriate method of change. For Mahatma Gandhiji, British Raj constitutes a struggle between the modern civilization, which is kingdom of Satan, as he says, and the ancient civilization, which is kingdom of God. Mahatma Gandhiji fought British imperialism with civil disobedience. In his own words, non-violence, which is the quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. So this shows us that how Mahatma Gandhiji fought the injustices of the British rule. In an example here, he marched to the coast with a growing number of people to symbolically collect salt from the sea. This shows us that how Mahatma Gandhiji and his perspectives on truth, non-violence have an enduring bearing and significance on pacifism. An example case here, that how during the Japanese military intervention during the Second World War, there were remarks that this may help India achieve independence. And as we quote from Mahatma Gandhiji's words, that is, I would not be guilty of inviting any power to invade India for the purpose of expelling the English. For one thing, it would be contrary to my creed of non-violence, and in any case, I have no desire to substitute British rule with any other foreign rule. I want unadulterated home rule, however inferior in quality it may be. So these are powering words, that how he condemned military action, he condemned imperialism, and he put forward an idea based on freedom acquired from the domestic strengths and struggle based on truth and non-violence. An important perspective that we get from mkgandhi.org, from the work of Thomas Weber and Akira Hayashi, that irrespective of this Gandhian criticism of having Japanese intervention in Indian independence, Japanese visitors were regular to his ashrams. The Nichiren monks, they had a lasting impression, and this legacy continued in fostering understanding between the two nations even today. So what we see here is that power, which is central to IR, Gandhiji asserted that power is of two kinds. One which is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other that is based on acts of love. For Mahatma Gandhiji, power based on love is indeed very powerful and permanent. And above all, his words that the day the power of love overrules the love of power, the world will know peace. Most important, when we go by various remarks and various ideas and perspectives put forward by Mahatma Gandhiji, we realize that how violence has many realms. And today, when we look at global order in terms of ecology, in terms of rampant changes and disruption, Mahatma Gandhiji's perspective that what we are doing to the forests of the world is a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another. His idea that there's more to life than just increasing its speed. So this tells us, dear learners, that how important it is to revisit, to always affirm our pledge towards the Gandhian vision of peace, truth and non-violence. The world has seen the enduring aspect of realism as a guiding approach for world politics. But when we look at pacifism and how it has been ignored, Gandhian perspectives gives us an opportunity, a terrain, a plane to revisit pacifism, reanalyze it in terms of contemporary world issues, ranging from the traditional military aspects of war, conflict, to the non-traditional aspects of ecology, technological disruption, economy, amongst others. So therefore, pacifism as a perspective needs to be analyzed further in IR theory, and the Gandhian perspective indeed adds more realms of understanding to it in terms of both theory as well as practice. Dear learners, we hope you all gained significant insights into the aspects of significance of Gandhian ideals for pacifism and how important it is for us to analyze, reimagine pacifism with respect to the enduring legacy of Gandhian principles of truth and non-violence. Thank you very much for being with us for the lecture.